Okay. So, hi everybody. Welcome to our last session of the ACAM Lecture Series. I'm quite happy to be here today with you to discuss one of the 10 topics we have been discussing so far. Last week we have a hybrid event, and you can see the recording in our YouTube channel. Was really interesting and quite exciting to have a face-to-face event. And today we are going to discuss how we can reimagine living environments. We have two great speakers to present their work and their research, and we will also discuss their presentation. This is the program today. Francesco and Sophie will be sharing the session today and presenting or speaking properly. And without further delay, I would like to invite Francesco to introduce our first speaker, Kimmo Ronka.
Hello everybody. Hello Kimmo. And yes, Kimmo Ronka is a future living specialist. That's the definition on his business card. He is a consultant with his own company and has curious mind that brought him through different stages in his working career, from a researcher at VTT Research Center in Finland to become director of Future Home Institute at the University of Art and Design in Helsinki. And later on, he was appointed CEO of a rental housing company, Settlementi Asunnot, where among the projects that he led was a multi-generation block in Jätkäsaari in Helsinki. And more recently, he is now developing a wooden co-housing block called the Circular Economy Block in Jätkäsaari in Helsinki, which will be completed in 2024, together with the Yrjö ja Hanna Saatio Foundation and Nal Asunnot. So he said that he's a development missionary who encourages companies and cities to new thinking. And well, we are looking forward to hear your new thinking approach, if we think future enough or not. Floor is yours, Kimmo. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Francesco. So I will start now. All right. Okay. Do you speak future? So the point in this speaking about future or using the words that are for future is because most of us talk today, and even some uses words of past. So the point is that if you create something new, you have to use new words and new terms and new definitions in order to achieve what you want. So to the beginning, to say I'm not an architect, but I've been working a lot with architects. For example, I've been working with Francesco and I've been working with Panu, and I've called myself an architecture producer, and another title is I'm a developer whistler, meaning that I'm somewhere between something and helping things to happen. But what I'm now going to talk about, I will have some content of this, more about these words and definitions, and then I go to living transformation. Then I will shortly present the story of Generations Block, because it was a big development project and I was involved there, and we used a lot of new words and new definitions there. Then I talk about we should reset the cities, and as a result, I give you some ideas. What about how to rethink the living environments? Okay, do you speak future? A few days ago, a Finnish national poet Kirsi Kunnas passed away, and this is what I read from a local or national newspaper. Kirsi and other poets, they created new ways of talking and writing because in the old times before the Second World War, the language was a bit wrong type of language. So Kirsi wrote a lot about tales for children, and with that kind of things, they create new ways how to talk differently. Another case, maybe you British know better, but this fifth story of the fifth Beatle, and you know that these four Beatles were very talented young guys, but they needed, and this George Martin helped them to achieve the audience. So he was the producer and somehow helped them to talk better, that people understood what was all about. Case number 3 is Kirsti Pakkanen, who was just also passed away a few days ago. She was a past owner of and CEO of Marimekko, the most famous Finnish company in ladies' clothes, and how she talked about future was that he worked with her heart, and the point was he was very warm and very strong and a person with a strong heart, and as a result he managed in the business. Number 4 is just from also from national broadcast company web page, You Tell Me Collective, and these 4 young architects are pushing new ways of talking about future environments strongly, because we need people who can speak future. Okay, and finally, maybe one person who can speak future in a way that most of us started to understand was Greta Thunberg, and I point in this my Greta talk is, what kind of planet do we have in 2080? Meaning that in those times, our children are grandfathers and grandmas, and what are they telling to their children? That's how I want to how to help people, my clients, to understand that this is a serious situation. Okay, another example of this planet, all, but how to talk about what is the problem, and I would like, after my presentation, maybe some of you could comment this idea that what about if we talk about carbon dioxide storage in the atmosphere or biosphere? So the space in the storage is lacking out. We don't have enough storage for carbon dioxide anymore, because it takes 400 to 1,000 years to disappear. It's like we can't do it. It's the storage is full, getting fuller. This urbanization, just showing that what's the problem. Problem is that these areas are full of people, and the same areas are maybe the most unlivable areas in 2070. So something will probably happen, and that's not a good thing. And in the end, the climate change is not only thing. It's a lot about this biodiversity collapse that we should talk about more, of course. And in Finland, our industry talks about wood production now, and we should talk about forest with biodiversity. So this is a dilemma in a lot of talk today. And one of my favorite slides is to present or try to open the idea of circular economy to normal people, that we should change from linear economy to circular economy. You all know this. And what is the city of future? It looks like this. It's much more greener. And the energy, it is producing its own energy, and it's full of nature. So that was the first part of my presentation. I go to living transformation. And what happened after Corona was that we found a new living rhythm. And this is a picture 1.5 years ago I took when I was jogging during the day because of coronavirus at home. So I've just noticed that this daddy is walking together with her daughter. And normally this daddy spends 100 days abroad, traveling all over the world. But because of coronavirus, he's spending lovely time with his family. And this is a new living rhythm that we have. I think we found something that we should not leave behind. And another thing was this working from summer cottage that we started to do because of coronavirus. Before, we couldn't say that I'm in my summer cottage because it was somehow sin. It was sin. You can't. You have to, be Protestant and work in your office, and that's all. But today, it's normal that you can do whatever, wherever you like. But as a result, we started to talk about own home doors, own yards, own balconies, and in Finland, roofs with saunas and views. So it's the whole idea of home changed. And also the meaning of common spaces, because flats are getting smaller, and the idea of communality, it is getting more important, I think, in this next years. In my point, I always say that man is a herd animal walking with 2 legs. It's how we act and how we do things. And the point is who belong to your herd. And that is why I called herd architecture. We should have herd architecture because we need spaces that people are willing to be. And this human-centered architecture supports birth of herd. So this is my favorite space in Helsinki. This is Science Corner in Helsinki. It's just near the university. It's part of the university, and those people who are there working, they are working alone, but they belong to this herd of Science Corner, and that's nice because it's nice to work because you have this feeling of belonging to something. And this next thing is this: we have to leave this idea of just functional cities to diverse living environments, and you notice from that picture that it's very nice, even it's very cheap, and it's somehow full of life. these kind of things that it's not about money, it's all about the feeling that you, or the will that you need to do things. Okay, then I go my first example, and for this, how to talk of future was, it's about this idea of living as a service. So I started 10 years ago talk about living as a service, not housing as a service, because living is much more. It's your life, and housing can be a platform of a good life, and that is the living as a service. Anyway, there is it's the generations block that Francesco just mentioned in the beginning. So it's a block in Jätkäsaari. The orange one. Actually, the people of Jätkäsaari like colors, and that is why they love the generations block, because it's different than these a bit dull colors others. Anyway, how to take this away? Anyway, okay. So, and this block was rewarded the best social housing in Finland 2017. The architect is Hedman and Matomäki architects, Mari Matomäki. Looks like this. And there are two flats, students, families, and rental for all ages. Three companies, and the point was that we made a block, not a building, and it was totally new thing in Finland that time when we started. And we used this method of Charles Leadbeater, how to make a social innovation strategy. And the idea was this number 4, transform. We created together with the people, a group of companies, and there were the companies, and we worked 2 years quite hard together. There was the University of Aalto University involved, and we did a lot of co-creation, user involvement, and so what was the result? I always start with the word why we didn't need blocks, and why we need it. It's this new kind of experience of city living, and it's an active neighborhood that we wanted to create, and we wanted to transform the city innovation with this project. And the point after why we goes to how, the strategic choices. Sorry. And then it was all about co-creation between developers, service providers, and public sector and users. So co-creation is the key point. And the idea that we made the service concept and architecture together, and we tried to listen very hard to the end users, and that stage the sharing economy was just started to come to the market. What was the result? We had this architecture of we had a common space in one we located in one space. We had a block coach, a person who helped activates, encourages, and motivates and supports the residents. And the idea was to share this skills, knowledge, and passion of the residents in the area. So this was the concept. It was content and the walls at the same time. On the left side was the service design approach, and on the right side there was this architectural point. And together with me, I was the old-fashioned consultant. Together with me was Kirsten Saini, who was the industrial designer, service designer, working together with me. And we used persona method, and Kirsten was the person who did the process. And we analyzed the future living scenarios during the day with different personas, and we analyzed when are the residents present in the block, and what are they doing? Are they doing together or alone? And we understood the meaning of hallway, mobility, understanding the meaning of mobility, and how can those spaces support community. And the idea was also to create a super flexible space for common spaces. And as a result, we had these 2,262 flats with 300 square meters of common space and an indoor walking route in the block. So on the left side, you can see the concept and the architecture, walls and the content. A gym room. The idea was there that we analyzed the people that maybe the idea was to combine gym room and laundry together. That people go to laundry, wash their clothes there, and during the time the machines are going, they go to gym. And actually it was working quite hard. Common room was there and all was transparent, and you could see it. So this is the laundry room. And also we got this idea that we need a stage for performances. And these all spaces are included in the rent. And these spaces, you know, Finnish people they love ice hockey and ice hockey championships, and this is 4 years old picture. So there is a big screens there to see those, for example, these events together. And this is also the idea. And this walkway, it's like an altar of a living block. And the idea was this to help people to see each other in the block, helping them to know and say hello to their neighbors. So this was all about places and things, and biking was important, so we collected a place for bikes in the yard. And also this do-it-yourself space. We had this idea that people wanted to repair their own stuff, and we created a space there. And also a room for music. And one of the ideas was that people who had passion for music and maybe never had ability to do it, so they could do it in this block. Actually, they had a band that nobody couldn't play and in the beginning, but in the end they did it. And as a yard, common yard is like also very active part of the block. So this was it, all included into the rent. This was the first one, and it was scalable. The second one was we did it in the city of Joensuu, and number 3 we did it to the city of Tampere. Then I was working with another companies. We did it in Jyväskylä. It's not finished, it's under construction. And actually there was a group of people from Netherlands, a company called Umer. Their directors spent 1 day in Generations block, and as a result they made this in-horn project there, and actually it's finished based on Finnish idea, or the idea of Generations block. And shortly, what's the code of the future cities? It's easy to remember. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you don't remember anything else, please remember this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, what does it mean? You live alone or together with somebody. The third room is in the block, and the fourth room is in the city. And this was all the time what we presented. 1, 2, 3, 4. You live alone or together with somebody. The third room is in the block, and the fourth room is in the city. Meaning that the theaters, restaurants, and others are number 4, but the common space, saunas, gym, laundry, they are the third places in the block. And this was supposed to be scalable, and it is. And this is how I see the future of the cities. Okay, and I go also to explain something to how to speak future, meaning that how to express what you want to say. This is like a typical rental housing project or apartment, and no services, and that's it. But we had this idea of affordable, all-inclusive living as a service, and these are included. Most of them are included into the rent, and so it was much more. But the point was like a paradox: affordable, all-inclusive, because all-inclusive is normally for luxury apartments. So we had this idea of social housing being all-inclusive, affordable, because it's fair to have using sharing economy, because it's much more easier if you have enough rooms, enough block. It's economic possible to do it. But also community kitchens were a key point when you want to create communality, and we used good design in this, and also better food, better feeling. These ladies made the food by themselves, and they had a party when they wanted to present how nice it is to live in that block. And this was so 4 years ago when I was the CEO of the social housing. This was the brand of the company, that it's communality. It's we focused on the people, not the walls. But we also needed to have common spaces and common kitchens in order to have this kind of result. And neighborhood was not only building or block. We also talk about neighborhood living as a service point of view. I go next to the part of reset the cities, and you all know that we talk about wicked problems, and I was thinking that that's not the right way of how to create solutions, and as a result I had this idea that we need infrastructure of hope. So hope is the point, and the infrastructure, we have to create infrastructure of hope. And we need more infrastructure of happiness, like Finlandia Award of Architecture. It's Fyri Library in Kirkkonummi. This word of infrastructure of happiness was set by the architect of this library. So, and you know all this, but they had also this idea of extraordinary gardens. I think that's a lovely way of saying it's not a garden, it's extraordinary gardens. And I always enjoy to see permanent, temporary in the cities. This is an example of London. Just by accident, I saw this garden in London. And also this nature thinking means we need new totally new types of buildings. And I was in the beginning of this project there working with planetary architecture, working as an architecture producer, creating the idea, the atmosphere, the right mood, especially presenting the ideas to the developer. These problems are not architectural problems. These problems are how to implement them to developers' mindset. And that is where I focus. And we have these new slogans like worms have a right to vote. And I believe that I've been saying this to cities that we need biophilic general plans. We really need new approaches, and biophilic is, I enjoy the fresh feeling in this. And also I think people, normal people, they really love trees, old trees. Actually on the right side is an oak, age of 800 years, and these trees that people are in their neighborhoods, they are very, very important for them. So let's keep it. It takes 1 minute to cut a tree, but it takes 100 years to grow it. So let's be carefully with the trees. And also I go deeper, rights of dogs, fish, butterflies, and mushrooms. So we need to have empathy for nature much, much more to understand these. On the left side is this river that it's near where I live, and so the people, it was voluntary people who most of repaired the river, and so the river salmon is getting back, and so it's people are enjoying that fish is coming back, salmon is coming back. So it's, I always said that if it's good for fish, it must be good for people. And we Finns are very forest people, but now I talk about architects. They don't like the word forest suburbs. I think it's a beautiful word. Forest city. Most of our cities are forest cities. I think it's beautiful, but the old way of maybe 10, 20 years ago, even architects didn't like the idea of forest city. They wanted to create more urban. But I believe that in the next 10 years, we need to rename forest cities again. And this is my personal point of view. Mushroom madness, can it be cured? Because I'm very deeply involved with this. All right. I go the last part. So this is like part of this whole 8 session, climate emergency. It's not climate change, it's not climate crisis, it's climate emergency. We need stronger words. Biodiversity collapse, it's really going to collapse. So only thing is to act now, and this is what I talk about this, my clients that do it now. Let's start to act now. And another thing is that what I ask to people, that in the old times we asked that how would Apple run your business? How would Microsoft run your business? Or whatever that type of modern companies. How would Google run your business? But in the future, we should ask that how would nature run your business? And somehow, I think nature would run businesses quite differently. And then this empathy. You remember the slogan location, 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 or whatever different. I said empathy, empathy, and empathy. And we need totally different, some kind of planetary empathy to reimagine the living environments. Human point of view is important, but we have to think others, species, trees, flies as well. And this is an example of biodiversity, but you can think this as a human diversity or a city. And in nature, you can find poison fungal and delicious mushrooms in the same woods. If I check, if I first saw these red poison fungal or mushrooms, these red ones, I always go there because there are probably mushrooms in there, and there are. And this is key point in the cities as well. I've heard this, that Jane Jacobs said that if the city is too focused on rich people, and it's you know, rich people are moving there, in some moment even rich people are moving away because it's getting duller. So this kind of nature approach in the cities is as well going quite good direction. If you have different mushrooms in the area, it's probably good for everybody of them. And the point of me is that I'm very serious about our generation, and this is why I talk about 2080, that when our children are at the age of senior citizens, so what are they telling their children, grandchildren? Are they telling that people who lived 2020, they tried to do something but they didn't manage it? Or are they telling that they were the heroes, they were the champions that made this climate change tackle and save the planet? And because of this, in these words and what I tried to say is that we should understand that always from caterpillars, they will create butterflies. And that was my story ending. Thank you.
Francesco, we cannot hear you.
No.
But it doesn't seem you're on mute, which is strange.
No, I think because the connection of the microphone with the headphones. You need to change the setting.
But thank you so much, Kimmo, for your talk. Do we speak future? Obviously not enough. The good news is I think a lot of our discussion is moving in that direction. I think some of your examples are really nice, although also I'm a bit of a cynic that we can show a lot of greenery in reality. Does it really work? And perhaps while we're waiting for Francesco to come back in, can you test again? No, still no. And it worked fine earlier, modern technology, there you go. Just to people who are here, feel free to ask any questions. Try that again. No, still no, Francesco. Do you want to jump out and come back into the call? And see if that fixes it. Yeah, that's what he's doing. People here, I don't know if Banu's still around, feel free to ask any questions as well or any comments as well. Feel free to do that. But I think really nice to also hear, I don't know, Sif, what happens in Norway, but one of the things that really, I shouldn't say surprised, because actually shocked me, how I know that Finland and the Nordic regions got still many trees, but then for development, we just cut them down and don't even think twice about it, even though, of course, in a cold climate, it takes many years to build trees to, to grow them to maturity. And then we start planting these tiny trees back from scratch for leisure and kind of privacy, and just generally to make the neighborhoods nicer. And I thought that was very that was unexpected for me. Also, the kind of explosion of rock. We just tend to explode it for land works and then flatten the landscape, and then we build eco homes on top of it. So it's something that I've been advocating. Please stop doing that. So I'm really pleased to hear that from you as well, Kimmo. But can you maybe say something about the culture around that, or how you think we can overcome and change that thinking? Particularly because you're working in industry here with different kind of stakeholders, and what's your sense of how do we actually shift that in reality? This cutting of trees, this overdevelopment, the exploding of rock. And perhaps if you could come in and say what happens in Norway as well, if it's similar or not.
Cutting of trees in the way that we do it today, it's only 60 years that we've done it. Yeah. Before that, it was traditional way of doing tree by tree. But this was some kind of, for example, my father, we have a small, we own, like very many Finns own forest. We have a place in the middle Finland, and so my father was actually some months ago very angry because he said that the industry has lied to him. So this is like some kind of big, huge lie that because of this industry needs the paper and the pulp and this material, and because of that they had this created the way how they grow wood, timber, and they forget the forest, the diversity of that. And but the point is that it was so, the whole ecosystem was so deep in that way. The industry was there, and because of after the Second World War, Finland was quite poor, and using the forest, it was that money that helped the welfare grow. It was, I would say, very big part of that was this wood industry that creates this wellness to Finland. But now it must be changed because we have to change the way of doing things.
Yeah, we still have that mentality, even if it's not to make timber, a paper, we still have to sort of let's clear the land and start again. I think we've got quite a few questions actually in the chat, but Francesca, does it work? Yes, over to you again.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
I can hear
Thanks.
you now. Yeah.
Yes, we have a couple of questions. One is from Ville Haram. How do you work with participation with people as the future residents when they're normally not known beforehand? That's quite common in housing development. So how would you approach that?
Sorry. Okay. That's okay, because it's maybe some cases if it's a group of people that design the building together with them, so it's different then. But in normal cases, when I was working in social housing company, the point was that we wanted to have different people of different backgrounds there. So quite most of those things that people want rised up. Another thing was there that I call it marinating the architects. So architects were involved there working together with people with intellectual disabilities, because we did a lot of flats for them as well. But the point was that those architects, quite many times, they didn't understand how to create a flat for. So understanding, the point was to create understanding. The user involvement was all about creating understanding, getting deeper to understand what are the you know, it's eye to eye. I will say that it's you need to see. It's all about your eyes that you can see first. So it's you have to. And this user involvement is important because of otherwise those developers focus on economic points of view, and then they, you know, they want to limit all the extra spaces. And when I was the CEO of the social company, I wanted to maximize the common spaces.
Yeah,
that was a business strategy, and it worked. Actually, it worked.
I think you succeeded in a conundrum in architecture that is like architects want to change things and provide more, but then they crush against the developer that, you know, it's pushing to the other side of offering less and less square meters and so on. Or so for example, could you say something about the current project you have in Jätkäsaari, where you were showing that the idea is indeed a bit as in the settlement, they also not having more space and so on. How that's how did you manage to whisper in the ears of the developer and convince them that actually doing more won't put them bankrupt?
You mean in this new project?
In this new project or in other examples? Because I think as architects we always face with a sound no. Or at least we fear that we are facing with a sound no. So you find a way out, find a way around.
I have to say that when I was the CEO of the company, I worked maybe 3 months there, and I suddenly noticed that I'm a CEO, I can do it, and we did it. So, but as a consultant, you have to convince, you have to try to open the eyes, and it's 100 times more difficult. That is user involvement, explaining users human points of view. Maybe somehow a CEO of company, maybe he has a grandfather and he understands, or children. You have to, somehow try to get the things inside to the heart. I will say that brainstorm is not enough. You need heartstorm.
And maybe I wonder if it can come in now, because I know that these are issues close to your heart as well, Siv, the participatory processes, wood construction, and so on. So I wonder, I know your talk hasn't been delivered yet, but if you did want to say anything, please feel free to do, or we can come back to it afterwards as well.
Yes, thank you. I will speak about these issues and very kind of in a bit different ways, but related to some concrete projects. But maybe what I think is interesting is that we all experience this struggle with the developer and the system, the housing industry, in fact, based on the model of a private investor or developer being in charge of it. But it's also interesting to see that each country has also differences in different possibilities, because there are different ways that the state or the municipalities are involved, and how private is it, and where are the private governmental kind of overlap, where is it that we can find some way to coordinate something, and where is it only based on the commercial market dynamic. And that's very different from the different countries, because you have also in the Nordic countries differences. You have more rental homes, it seems for me, and maybe that's also not only the private developer that are in charge, but also the state. In Denmark, there is also another model for how they do social housing. In Norway, we have very little social housing, so most of housing is made by private developers, and these differences gives different opportunities to intervene, I think, and make changes.
Yeah, thank you for those reflections. Back over to you, Francesco. I think that Panu might have had a question still. We probably
Exactly.
have time.
I would like just to run up with one question here and then give the floor to you, Sophie. So a question for Kim. How social communal life in Generations Block has evolved? Do you know how that continue? Also, maybe how if people is changing frequently there in rental apartments, or there is a community that's actually went on through the years. Do you have ideas about how this community evolved?
When I left the company, they a bit changed the concept, and the point is that we had a staff. I called it Block has a friendly faces. Block have a friendly face there, and we had a person called community coordinator there working, and the point was that their job was to help people to work with other people or live with other people. So it was like a first person there say hello to people, and then others followed and pushed the communality there. But today the company has changed the concept that there are no more that kind of service in there. So the communality is gone lower. And I believe that in the future we need human beings in the living blocks who are professionals who help, because I in that time we saved money having this person there, because it was very 99.7% was the use of the spaces. We were very popular. We didn't have lack of empty spaces there. And another thing was that if you create a block instead of one building, you can have better services. It's just economy. It's Excel that it's working. That was part of the developer talk. You had an Excel sheet which is working better when you have 262 flats there. It's much more easy to create a gym there, or a do-it-yourself room, even this music room. But the point is that if you want to have that kind of communal social housing, you have to be very active in the company, and that's different. That is what social housing companies are not doing. They just live. They are just housing. It's just housing, and I call it living.
Yeah,
it's much more, and you can work in the neighborhood areas. And I believe that this using digitalization, it's you just having these locking calendar systems in your mobile phone. You can also share these spaces to the neighborhood. So it's you just need to have new business model. But in normal cases, social housing companies are traditional business as usual. And when I changed job from that company, I think most of the company CEOs said that, now we can go back to the normal again.
But thanks for the great examples you show. And then when people care, then take care of the space. And I think those projects you show, they're really great examples. Okay, Sophie, floor is yours.
Yeah, but actually before I introduce Siv, I just wanted to follow on very quickly about this notion of housing versus living, right? And what I can report is that a lot of the work, almost all the work we do here in the architecture school and our teaching has moved away from just housing design, as in just a block of houses and an apartment block, but very much about living environments we refer to. And it's very much it's pretty much the four levels. We don't necessarily go out into the city. It's probably to the neighborhood level, so block and neighborhood, because of just the sheer time we have, but also our research. And I think actually the pandemic has really shown that it wasn't just people who had good housing conditions. you know, how well that they mentally could manage with working and studying and from home, but also then depended on the living environment around them, the social infrastructure they had. And I think a lot of people have become more aware of that. And actually, even just before the pandemic happened, we got a research project funded by a social housing company and the foundation of that company to specifically look at living environments and how that spaces in the block could be more shared, but even in the neighborhood as well. And then, of course, COVID happened, and I think everything changed. But the project was actually, and it still has been, about the living environment. So that I think the debate around this is changing in a good way, I think. But of course, like everything, it feels it's not fast enough and not radical enough, and that the change is not, that it's only in small pockets we start to see it and not mainstreaming some of these ideas. And I guess on that note, I would like to introduce our next and very final speaker, not only of today, but as Raoul also introduced, we've had these 10 lecture series under the banner of Everything Needs to Change. And we've gone from our urban planning colleagues who started with the bigger kind of picture and then also sort of at the regional kind of scale discussions. And we've gone all the way down to these living environments that we talk about today. And Siv, and I hope I'm going to pronounce your name correctly, Helene Stangeland, is a Norwegian architect and researcher, and she's based in Stavanger, Norway. She studied at the Technical University in Barcelona, also at the Oslo School of Architecture and Design under Sverre Fein and Christian Norberg-Schulz. Together with Reinhard Kroff, she founded the architectural office Helen & Hard in 1996, which today has 25 employees and offices in Oslo and Stavanger. She received a PhD in architecture from the Aarhus School of Architecture in Denmark in 2017. And you won't remember this, Siv, but I actually saw you speak there for the first time in 2018 when Walter Unterreiner organized a conference there. And I worked there with Walter for about 2 years before I then got poached here to Finland. So, you know, and I'm also a colleague from Liz and Ulla who visited you. And unfortunately, I could not make it. So, but they absolutely love your work as well. And for students that are here, particularly some of your projects are often as exemplars, particularly Vindmolenbakke as well. But I digress. Because your practice, Helen & Hard, has received several awards for their work, including the Norwegian National Award for Building and Environmental Design for the Pulpit Rock Mountain Lodge and the Vennesla Library. You've exhibited internationally, including at the Venice Biennale, the Lisbon Biennale, Manifesta 7, at the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And you were also designers of the Norwegian Pavilion at Expo Shanghai 2010. In 2012, the practice published a monography, Helen & Hard Relational Design. The practice has been awarded the RIBA's International Fellowship, and Helen & Hard have an extensive body of built work in timber. The last to be finalized has been the headquarters for the SR Bank and the co-living project Vindmolenbakke, both in Stavanger, Norway. And Helen & Hard have taught and lectured extensively in Europe, North America, and Asia about their research on holistic sustainable practices and their specialization in timber architecture and co-housing. So a very warm welcome to you, Siv, and I'm sure not just me, but all of us look forward to hearing you talk. So thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you so much for being invited. And I was very inspired by Kimmo's holistic lecture and kind of grasping the complexity of our work as architects, because it's really about working on so many different levels and being part of changing systems around us. But I will, in fact, try to concentrate on 2 projects and be very specific about how we can do changes in my lecture here. So I will share screen now and see if we can start. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I will speak about participation and designing for participation, meaning then how we can design for participation to engage, to be engaged in our common social environmental challenges. Participation is for us a very important part of what we call a relational design attitude, where we think about architecture as both, of course, something we do by participating in a very broad aspect, but it's also that we design for future participation, for how people can inhabit and use our buildings in different ways. But we think that participation is intrinsic to creating our sound social, ecological environments for the future. So how do we do that? And I will try to give some very specific examples. Helen and Hard did a lot of housing projects in the commercial market. And as we have spoken about, it's a market that is in Norway completely dominated by private developers. And we were frustrated again and again about how poor kind of conditions we work under as architects, and how little we can influence how the end user is taken care of. End users are often just related to in statistics about what they need, what are the trends, what do they want, how big is an apartment for 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. It's standardized, and it doesn't really kind of take into consideration the big changes we have in family patterns, for example. But also poor in terms of how we relate to changes in our climate, and very little responding to, in fact, sustainability in general. So we always had to fight. We have to fight to get timber into even be considered. So that was a kind of status for us when we started to think, here we have to develop something new. And luckily we got in contact with the green investors, and she was very much interested in seeing if could we develop a model for housing that is different, but still possible to kind of integrate in the commercial market. And that's why we started to study co-living models and developed a co-living model that we call Gaining by Sharing. And the pilot project was realized in 2018. That is Vindmøllebakken, and I will show some examples from that project. So here you see it. It's in the eastern part of Stavanger, my hometown, merging into a very diverse, complex urban situation with old factories and new housing projects popping up. And it's a very dense, compact project with altogether there is 55 housing units here, but 40 of them belong to a co-housing. That's where you see the greenest roofs. And in these 40 units share 500 square meters. And this model, we try to find out how we could find just kind of reorganize square meter so that in the end, a unit in this project would cost the same as in a normal project, but the square meter would be distributed so that you have a smaller and compact private unit. And in addition, you have 500 square meter common space. So each unit buys 10 square meter of the common areas in addition to its private unit, and because it's smaller, you reach the same kind of sales cost. So that's the kind of trick we made to be able to introduce this into the commercial market. But it makes a huge difference, because it means that it means that we have 500 square meter with shared space that we can distribute, and we can reorganize how private units and common space are working together. And we are very occupied with organizing it so that you feel that you enter a part of your living environment. When you go outside your private unit, you should still be in your home and not enter a kind of institution or a boring corridor, and you have to work your way to find the shared space, but it should be something you immediately experience. So shared space is integral. It's a new way of organizing spatially a housing block. And then the other thing we focused about is to say these houses are only going to be built with timber, prefabricated, visible timber elements, because we think it's such a big part of the needs, and it also reminds people why are we doing this. The idea is that you can kind of provide housing that is sustainable, both material-wise, environmental-wise, but also socially. And exposed timber is giving a very good atmosphere. It's also good for the health. It's good for the acoustics in the common area and so on. So you see the buildup of the, I can show that later, in fact. And then the fourth part, which is core, is of course that we, with this model, wanted to say that we have a kind of facilitated participatory process where the developer doesn't need to be scared about it. It's all organized well. We take care of the contact with the end users and facilitate the process in a good way. So to reach this kind of optimization of square meter, we have been dealing a lot with plan layouts that are efficient, and that can also be arranged differently around shared spaces according to where the housing block is and the neighborhood, if it's low rise, if it's higher and more urban context for it. So here you see different variations of how these units can be organized around shared space. And up in the left corner, you see the plan layout of Vindmøllebakken with the private units organized around the shared space. The shared space is both an outdoor courtyard and half climatized space and of course climatized spaces also. And here is the building system we used in the pilot project. It's CLT, only used for fire resistance and exposed to the interior and then insulated with hemp. And in fact, the structural part of the wall is normal columns in the wall. But it's a breathing wall, all is timber. A bit about the user participation. What we found out is that the best way to organize it is to make a course. So people that are interested first they can participate in a seminar, and then they can sign up for a course. We made workshops that 3 different workshops with different themes, because there's a lot of different questions people have and concerns, and it takes much longer for them to make the decision because it's something new. They have to often move from a bigger flat to a quite small flat, and they don't know, or they don't even want, or they don't know how to understand what it is to share 500 square meter common space, and how are they going to organize this? What is about the conflict? And all these questions we need to discuss them together and find ways of communicate it. Yeah. And it's also a way to get to know each other, of course. So people start immediately also to be interested in who are these future neighbors. We are very specific about that these co-living projects should have different generations, because that gives good synergies in a normal day. Some people are at home, some people have children, some are good time, little time, and so on. So it's also in these courses and workshops, it's to understand that we have different needs, different life situations, different economies, but it's also to find out what are the sharing values and intentions when you move into a co-living project. And of course, the model Gaining by Sharing is all about managing to make a platform for a more sustainable life, but it's also bringing into focus how can the social life be inspiring, and how can we help each other to create this community that we want. So here you see from the courtyard into the very central communal space, where there is also a communal kitchen and where all the meetings takes place. You also see the buffer zone between this central area and the apartments, which is half climatized and more open to different programs. This is another view of this buffer zone, half climatized, and you see how you enter out from your private unit, and you have visual views, so you can kind of follow what is going on in the common areas, which is very important, because it's like that's the way also you get engaged in doing things together and following up initiatives, seeing that there are people in the kitchen or something is going on that you want to join. What we saw very early is that people are most interested in first, people want to kind of know that they get to that they get their own apartment like they need it to be, even though it's small. So we focused on the possibility of doing adjustments, and it can be very small adjustments, but it makes a big difference for people, that they can move them in a window a little bit. They can have a site-specific furniture built that provide exactly what they need for storage, or an old furniture they want to have space for. And so the units are very different in the end, but you can see how the timber surfaces are making a very good atmosphere. So this is all based on people organizing themselves. So in the model Gaining by Sharing, we only provide a facilitated process up until people move in, and afterwards it's self-organized. But during this participatory process, of course, there were introduced ways of organizing, for example, house meetings, conflicts, and it's also based on groups taking care of different activities and spaces. And it's this caring for the different shared space that makes the whole house work in an everyday life. Me and my partner also moved in, so we have been living there 2 years now, and it's very interesting to to experience your own inventions and learn from that. So we have learned a lot, indeed. But it's very positive to see how a community like this find ways to negotiate the space they share, because that's what's going on. We share these 500 square meter. It's a lot of different spaces. There are guest rooms, there are library, there is a party room, there's a garden house. But they are flexible and there are multiple use all the time. So it's a constant kind of taking care of each other's need and need for using these spaces. So it's a lot of learning how to find a consensus, which takes time. It's not always easy, but it's also what makes up the kind of social cohesion, and we get to know each other very well. The pandemic was a very special experience. Here you see how we reorganized the big living room with good distance, and it's interesting to see that because of having these buffer zones which are shared, we could in fact still have a social life. And because we are good organized, we can make rules and we can respect rules, and so most of the people living here had a very good time during the pandemic. So I think I will jump to the next project, which is a kind of continuation of Møllebakken and the experience of living here, and also learning from our co-inhabitants the experience. So when we got invited to the Venice Biennale this year, with the theme of what we share, how we will live together, we decided to use Møllebakken as a case and take the idea of co-living a step further. So interviewing then 14 of our co-living neighbors, asking them if they should share even more in the future co-housing, what would then be most important in their own space, and what could they be willing to share even more and take responsibility for outside their apartment, and what is it that they want to create together as an idea or a vision. So these questions were then kind of our input to make an installation in a full scale in the Nordic Pavilion. And what we tried to kind of study specifically here was the transmission between the private unit and the shared spaces. And we discovered that a lot of people want to have things just outside their door. They can imagine to move things from their private area and outside to share it, but have it quite close to their entrance door, for example. And also if they are going to take care of something, they want it to be close by, not far away, not in another store, not in another part of the house. So we introduced what we call the sharing layer, and also developed a kind of a building system, because we think, and we have seen in Vindmøllebakken, that this negotiating activity needs also a response, a material response, because we want these spaces to be adapted to different use. And over time, now we have more children, so we need to build something there to provide for storage for toys, for example, or yeah, and that was the idea, to see if we can find a way to or develop a kind of building system which is easy to build up and down, and can provide this shared layer, as well as also building the space for the units. So in the pavilion, we have built a kind of cross-section of a full-scale future co-living project, where you see parts of the private units at each side, and the sharing layer kind of providing also this central space. The building system is made of planks of timber, with holes in them, and then you have beech dovels to put between them, and then you can build all kind of shelves, and the shelves can become multifunctional furniture as well as storage space. So the idea of sharing is here taken a bit, or quite a lot, further than in Vindmøllebakken, where we kind of expose that the possibility of putting stuff that you want to share with your neighbors into these structures, things and installations, as well as also activities. So here is also a workshop where you can build with this system. And outside, we have placed the workshop outside the flat where they live, a couple that really wants to care about the workshop. And here's a situation where people, with an elder man that wanted a small table outside, so he can kind of invite neighbors and sit outside his window, and even serve food out from his own apartment. This is just outside a small family with children, and so we have provided a kind of play installation under the stair. And we also had a seminar with architects from Venice and Turin. Homer has kind of specialized also in co-housing in Italy. So we exchanged how we work with co-housing and the differences between Norway and Italy in managing this, or how we are culturally different also, kind of instilled or minded to do this, which is very interesting, because we have a lot in common and a lot of differences, of course, and I think that's something we have to take into consideration. And this installation from Venice Biennale will be recycled and used in new co-housing that we are planning now in Norway. So these were examples, and I'm very much interested in having a dialogue. If you have questions or things you want me to talk more about, I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Siv. It's so wonderful to hear you talk about Vindmøllebakke. I can't properly pronounce it. I try. And I actually had a question about this, and let's wait for some more to come in as well. Would you say, because I think the gaining by sharing is such an interesting way of putting this whole notion of, the co-housing, the co-living, the sharing economy, because it's really you gain by sharing. And you've really shown that that's the case in Vindmøllebakke, that people get these extra things and it's delivered at the same cost. But would you say that you needed to be more creative as an architect to achieve that?
I think that we as architects very much have to take on different roles or invite different people into our processes to handle these new challenges we have. So in gaining by sharing, we really had to make our own company and provide a licensed model to developers now, where we really can specifically say this is what we deliver. We deliver, of course, architecture, but it's not enough. We also have to deliver the social kind of infrastructure, the participatory facilitated process, how that's working. We have to describe the different stages. We have to give them a kind of assurance that this is working. And we also have to show them how you can sell this, because they're all skeptical to it. So we have to enter into kind of different parts of the value chain in the production of houses, and be interested in solving that. Some part of it is, a lot of it is architecture and design, but it's also design in more invisible design areas. For example, also now we engage very much in developing a digital platform. We use what is there at the moment, but it's not really suited for what we want it to be. So I think that engaging both in the material and this both in the spatial, the material, and the social infrastructure, that's where we have to kind of widen up our role as architects.
And then actually your own business structure as well, right? That's where you're really being creative as well, which I think also was the case with Kimmo and the way he thought of his own business model as well. And I'm also specifically, I guess, asking this about, the sort of adaptability changes over time, that it is at the same time, there is these prefabricated parts, but then there's still a very individual approach to the units as well. And when you study the plans of Vindmøllebakke, they're super clever. When you say that people have 10% less space, I don't think you would notice or know it, because you've been so clever when, where an entry hall becomes a little study and you avoid corridors as such. So you actually have made utter use of the space, and it makes you wonder, why are we not doing that in other housing? As many of us are not doing that. And I think you've also been very clever at how, when you have by shifting each of the corner or like the units out from one another, you create double aspect apartments, and you have windows on both sides. Also, again, living quality, they feel more spacious, they look great. And I think it's so exemplary in so many ways. But it's interesting that your answer wasn't actually about the spatial details in that way, but really more about the way you think about this kind of model, and then the structure around it, and that you sort of have to think more creative about your role as the architect in that. Yeah, it's super interesting and super inspirational, I think. I guess what I'm trying to get at, and then I can see loads of questions now coming in, which is great, and comments, so we'll pick these up. But I think in a way, what I get the sense from both you and Kimmo is that if we're going to create living environments that are really very different and meet challenges of the day that aren't just only about carbon, but also about successful communities, then we need to think and work differently. And actually that, you sort of described that, I think, quite well. I mean, Kimmo, do you want to come in on this as well? And Siv, if you want to add anything.
Yes, I always say that people believe when they see. You need to see. So my question was that how much visitors do you have in that block of yours?
We have a lot, and now Vindmøllebakken have an own group organizing visitors, and we also take payment, and that's how we can buy new furniture. So it's a whole economy, new economy in Vindmøllebakken. Yeah, there is a lot of architects, but also municipalities, planners, master planners.
So spreading the word in that
It
way. Is that what you refer to, Kimmo, that it helps when people see a new model, that it helps to mainstream and yeah.
This was the method how we made it scalable, was that I didn't meet, when I was the CEO of the company, I didn't have meetings in office. We had always meetings in generations block or another block, because I wanted to show that it's really working. And I always let people, those visitors, to meet inhabitants. And I said always to the inhabitants, what do you like? Do you like to live here? Or can you say something to this? And there were maybe 10% things that they said that this is not working, but 90% was positive. So I took that risk always, and it was worth of it. So the point was that those people believe what they see, and it was also those developers and the other cities. And as a result, they said the cities said that we want a generations block to our city. And that was how I did this scalable thing, that those people from Joensuu, city of Joensuu, they visited Helsinki, and as a result, they said that we want the generations block in our city, and we did it. And then city of Tampere people, I said to city of Tampere people that Joensuu is now working like that. Would you like I also do that like that? And they want it. So this was like a selling process as well. So I really enjoy this, especially this November weather. We were just talking with Raul about this winter weather, and I think winter evenings in this kind of block are wonderful. It's like tackle the cold weather, spending time in these common spaces. It's really wonderful. Congratulations, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think that the quality of the housing in the spaces is quite amazing. And actually, and then I'll ask a question. When I first saw the proposal before it was built, I was a little concerned about that main, the atrium space, and in the section, I thought, oh, that you're not going to get a lot of daylight there, but it looks very light. And I know from people who visited it, it's amazing. That, because I'm also thinking it's, quite north, but actually it seems to work really well. Because of the way you've designed it. And actually somebody is asking the question, what lessons you have learned after 2 years of living in the co-housing you have designed yourself?
Yeah, I've learned a lot. I mean, it's learning on many different levels. As an architect, I learned, and the kind of as an owner of this model, the gaining by sharing model, we learn a lot, of course. Some things I've said, but it's, for example, this issue with storage is coming up all the time, because if you have shared space and you have multiple needs of using that space, you need a lot of storage. So that's a very practical thing, and that's why we also ended up with making a kind of shelf system in the Biennale to show that sharing is also caring for space to share stuff that you need to care about. But then it's also...
Sorry to briefly interrupt, because some of the photos, I was thinking that's the same big dining hall used in a different way. Is that correct? Or like you're... Yeah, so I can see what you're saying. You then have these multi-use spaces. It gets used for dinner, but then it could be for a hobby room, and that's why you need to be able to, that's great conflict. Yeah,
it's a repair cafe, or it's suddenly a film evening, or it's a big course for gardening, or whatever. Lots of things going on. But the other thing what we learned is that we have to control the fire escape routes, because they demand that you don't have anything in them. So that are very practical issues. If you want a space to look like what you see in the picture, there are quite a lot of things you have to organize in good ways. So that's behind the scene. But on a personal level, I also want to say that I've learned a lot about consensus processes and also the dynamic in between spatial, to have spaces that inspire for different use, and that then at the same time how the social kind of care comes in, because if we don't have a care for each other and for each other's different views and different needs and different opinions, it won't work. So there is a kind of learning in being generous and understanding that we are different, and also giving up on your own view sometimes. And as the designer, I have also to learn to be that the spaces get filled up with things I don't like. So there is a lot of learning on different levels, I will say.
And you also described some of this in the Everything Needs to Change publication that we had that you contributed to in spring. I've just put a link in here as well. So yeah, so there's this learning of like more practical things, how also the consensus and also clearly how you're taking things forward into now new projects as well. Obviously the Biennale, but how it's helping you move forward. There was a question related again to Vindmolenbakken about whether your projects are perhaps particularly Vindmolenbakken. Is it car free?
Yeah. Oh, there are 3 places to share. So it's car free. Yeah, basically. So there, but it's in a very urban area where you have all the infrastructures you need around.
Debbie is in the background. I don't know if you can see her because she's still sharing. You asked the question. If you like, you can stop sharing. You can see the participants here. She was hands up celebrating here.
Oh, yeah.
Very happy with the car free.
Yeah.
But as you say, it's got the actual mobility support and infrastructure to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Can I comment one thing? You used the word care, and I think it's very important to talk about word care because it's different than the word service. Service is something that you pay. Care is something that you maybe love or you really care. So it's this human energy that is in the block that is it's something. Then you have found the communality then when the care is involved.
Exactly, and that's interesting. How do we create that? I think to a certain degree we can do it with providing space and architecture and design that helps it, but there is also something more than that. It's also a facilitation of it, I think, helping people to be secure, helping people to get the experience of what it means to be part of a community, because once you have experienced it, it's like something you just want more and more. You don't want to live alone anymore. but it's difficult to put words on.
Yes, I've heard these stories told by the inhabitants. One was stories that the elderly people and some of them maybe the guy, the older man dies, and the widow explains me that if she would live in a normal house, it would be terrible, but in this community it was easy because the care was there, and the community helped me in this. Another thing was one lady said that it took 2 years for me to learn how to live in a community like this. So, but you have to learn how to live together. Like I always said that this is a return of the village.
It is, yeah.
In the cities, meaning that you have to also, you don't have to be best friends with all people. But you have to, be part of the community. And there are
exactly.
groups of people and herds, different herds there.
Exactly, and I think maybe we know more about this than we know. I think it's also something somewhere deep inside we have a sense of being part of a community, and but it has to be awakened again, and it has to be activated again. And today we have also all kind of help to do that. So I think we should address this as a part of making architecture more.
I would like to say something, because I've been working with social housing, and it's working quite nice with people who have enough thick wallet and they have money to buy it, and they have education and so on. But if it's social housing, there are also people who don't have a lot of capability to do like this. So that is why I personally believe that we need these professionals who help people to be part of the community. I call them community coordinators, who help people to, have, because they don't have a lot of resources. So you have to somehow find their ways to prove that they still have some resources. You can be good in something. You have to help people to find their abilities and talents and so on. There need to be a professional there. So, and I believe that this sharing it's fair to have these common spaces. It's fair because it's if you have a very small flat and you have these beautiful common spaces, it's like quite fair and it's part of the signature of a very beautiful society which have ability to do this. Not only people who have afford of it, but also about those who can be part of it. So that is why I think it should be part of social housing as well, but it needs new business models. It needs new talents in the companies. It's
Definitely.
not only engineering, it's human science. It's totally different.
I chip in because there was a question from before, but I think that the conversation is really interesting, and creating this community, it now made me think about how also, like you were saying, it took 2 years to learn to live together, and it could really help the society as such, as we see that there is a great divide in many aspects, nowadays. So well, if you live in a community, you can learn just every day, to negotiate, as you were saying, in order to find a consensus. So this can help in small things where you put the table there in the common area, but as a society as such, I think it can be an incredible, powerful tool for us as a society to grow. That was a reflection on what we were saying. The question here is, it came a question about how COVID will change or impact the idea of social common housing and spaces. Sure, you show some example. You can do it, but it creates some strains to it. So how can the things will change if in any way?
Can I just quickly jump in on that? Because I think, for example, in Finland, when people had shared spaces, which is like the sauna, they often have been closed all the duration of COVID. And one thing I also wanted to quickly follow on, I absolutely agree that we need to provide the spaces and the common spaces so it can really support them. But I think Siv has also shown in her projects that it's really important, their quality, and also in Kimmo's projects as well, because when we typically provide spaces, basically my fear is that developers can use this idea of smaller units and we just provide some shitty common space in the basement and we make even more money. Great. But that clearly is then not going to support the community in the same way. And I think there is always that danger that we have to be very careful how we frame the gaining by sharing, because then you're not gaining by sharing it, apart from the developer gains.
Exactly.
And yeah, so I think there is a very fine balance as well. But I think the COVID question is very good, because it's sort of more individual people using their cars rather than public transport to not run an infection risk and so on. We also actually have two more questions, one from Panu in case after this one about the ownership model, which links back a little bit to the social housing, and then the Windmolenbacke, which is what that model is. But maybe the COVID could be a discussion first, and then perhaps Panu wants to unmute, or I can read it out.
Yeah, but I think that the COVID period has shown us that our environment, not a private unit, is of course also something we have learned need maybe more qualities if we're going to survive in such periods, but also the immediate environment. So to have these extra buffer zone around you, which you share, is making a lot of difference, because one thing is to be part of a community and feel supported in a stressed situation like this, and know that you are not alone. You can talk with more people. You can organize how to make it work better, but also to just have the space to move around and be more flexible than in your everyday life has proven, at least in Windmolenbakken, to be core in making people finding or experiencing that period as something extraordinary, because we were so supportive to each other, and we had also great times in this difficult
It's a social infrastructure, right? That the spaces that were designed were generous enough so you could do the physical distancing, but also the social infrastructure existed that people could support one another, rather than if you just have unit next to unit, then it's sort of, and you don't know your neighbors. And it's this sort of like, especially at the beginning, strange kind of world. Yeah. So what you're saying is that actually that the co-living has even shown to be very robust, even in the pandemic, and when we could get ill from one another, it's actually helped each other not be mentally ill, at least. And thank you for sharing those pictures of the physical distancing in the space. And you could still use the spaces and didn't have to close them down, like I think has happened elsewhere. Perhaps Panu, do you want to unmute, or shall I read out your question if Panu is still there?
Just one quick thing, that Siv Helen said that she has to leave sharp at 6, or maybe a minute before to jump to the next meeting. So we don't want to take you too long. Maybe one quick question answer, but then we can continue. But Siv Helen.
Elusive. Go on, Panu.
Well, thanks. Fantastic examples and very thought-provoking presentation. My question is really, you already mentioned this. How to market your solutions, but my question is about the institutional and ownership model. Is it so that people who come in, they have full ownership of the private space, and then there's some kind of shared ownership of the additional shared space, or how it works? Because clearly in rental, like what Kim was presenting, the generation block, it's social and rental housing. It's easier to organize. There is still one organizer of everything. But if you own, how do you organize?
Yeah, so this is, I think that is core to the success in Windmolenbakken, is that there is a shared ownership. So you buy and own your own private unit, and in addition you own together the shared space, and you have paid for it. So in that sense, you also want to engage to make it work for yourself. So that's why the engagement is there naturally, because you don't want it to be kind of left over to others. So I think it's an interesting, we found an interesting way of providing engagement and ownership, and at the same time there is enough space so that people feel that they can always kind of find their own usage and needs provided for. but I think, and the key is that
I guess there is some kind of board of members of housing who then in a way run them shared space.
There is a formal board, but they are not running something or deciding anything. The decisions about how we use the shared space is taken in these monthly meetings. So the only thing that you are kind of you're not obliged, but you are expected to show up in these monthly meetings, because there is where negotiation and sharing and discussions and dialogues find space.
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly. Yeah, it's spatial design is the ownership model, but then it's also a social, as you actually said.
Yeah. So, and they have to work
completely different model
together.
That's the whole thing. Yes.
And then maybe time for one final question from Judith Kimpian, who's an expert in post-occupancy evaluation. Judith, if you want to ask it, or otherwise shall I read it out if Judith is still here?
Do read it, Sophie. It's fine. Hello. So lovely to see all this.
Yeah, so Judith is asking whether you had a chance or also perhaps Kimmo, to collect any occupant feedback to test how your assumptions about the use of the spaces have worked out in reality. Particularly, this is now with your architect hat on, of what the design intentions were versus then the actual reality, if you collected anything like that.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
If we maybe go first with Sif, given that we have 2 minutes before she disappears,
yes.
then Kimmo can follow on, and Sif
Okay,
can always
sure.
watch the recording. Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, I try to document all the time. What I find specifically interesting is how we manage to make space flexible, because I see that there is so many overlapping intentions and needs for using space that you share. So you need to have a flexibility, and at the same time you need to provide something that is inspiring and cozy, or somewhere that people want to go. And there is I think there is a real design challenge to manage that sweet spot, to find that sweet spot between multiple use of space and at the same time something which has value design-wise.
And so did you collect any, did you do a survey with the current residents to find out, does it meet their needs or not? Or because you obviously, it's a slightly strange role because you're also in these monthly meetings, of course, not just as the architect, as a resident, right?
Yeah, and what we find out is that it's changing. It's not constant. It's somehow a dynamic organism, because new children comes in, families are changing pattern, so it's not constant. It's really. And it depends also on the who are engaging, who are really kind of. There's 26 different entrance groups self-organizing in Vindmøllebakken, and they all have their activity that they want to have space for, and that's where the action takes place.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's 6 o'clock. Perhaps if Judith is interested to know more, she can always drop you a message, or we could maybe undertake a study like that.
Or pay a visit.
Yeah, come and visit.
Yeah, exactly. Visit.
Yeah,
I know.
Thank you.
I cannot believe that I missed out on the visit a year and a half ago when colleagues made it, because I only just had moved here to Finland. That's why I had to miss it. But thank you so much, Sif. I know that you have to leave, but thank you so much for your time and your inspirational talk. I don't know if Kimmo still would like to stay on, but of course, thank you so much, Kimmo, as well. But I think we have no more questions. We quickly want to do an ACAN wrap up. So we just want to say hi to you first, Sif, as well. Have a good rest of the day and your week, and I hope to see you in Norway.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sif. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye. So Kimmo, did you want to respond to that as well about some data collection or survey that you made down or checking whether the building performs as expected also at other levels?
Yes, but I have to say that 4 years ago, I haven't done this, but we measured this inhabitant feedback, and we noticed that the flat was the most important, and that was the most important part of the, even it was some kind of co-housing concept as. So the flats, that the individual spaces are very important, but you can measure it, and it's important to measure even if it's sometimes people express their feelings that they feel at the moment. They maybe just this we talked about this care feeling. Some of the residents, the inhabitants, didn't have or don't have the approach to care that we are talking now. So it's we did. I have to say that when in that company, we market a lot using words communality, co-housing, in order not how to say, we didn't want those who don't want to live in that building to so we used a lot of, I always said that over market using
the expectations of, and
yes, exactly. And the point was that those who wants to live that kind of buildings and blocks, they apply the apartments, and those who hate communality, don't, please go to another company. And it worked quite nicely, actually.
Yeah, and that's of course the case, as I understand it, also in Vindmolenbakken, that's people who chose to live that way, and of course, in your commitment's very different. Yeah. Is there any other questions from anybody else? I can't see any in the chat unless I missed them.
Yeah, if we missed something, please type again, because there was a moment that that chat was very active, so maybe we didn't get a question. I don't know.
Actually, I'm grateful for you, Francesco, picking up on the COVID one, because I missed that one. So I must have scrolled through to the bottom and hadn't seen it. But otherwise, well, we're obviously still here with Kimmo at least, but of course, Kimmo, thank you so much for your talk. Super interesting. And I definitely want to stay in touch with you about, sort of the work you're doing, but also the work we're doing. It'd be great to have an offline discussion and meet each other face to face as well. And talk about some of the common interests we have. And you've previously worked with Francesco and Panu, which I didn't know, which is awesome. So applause to Kimmo still. But then we just want to wrap up as part of ACAN. And we will actually reflect on these 10 lecture series and the discussion to think of what does it mean for our own work that we do, for example, Francesco, both in teaching but also in practice, and for most of us also in teaching, and how we take that forward, what's come out of this for us. We also in ACAN have for 2022 3 actions, which is activate. We are actually trying to actively recruit more members, because more members means we can be more active and do more actions as well. At the moment, we're very Tampere University based and Tampere based, and Francesco is in Helsinki, but it's Tampere University at the moment as well. So we'd like to have people more active from other parts of the country and other organizations, because it's not a Tampere University initiative. It's just most people that are active are located there. Then it was also communicate and educate. And of course, this lecture series is very much part of communicate, and then also related to educate as well, and some local actions we'd like to do. So please do get in touch if you want to be part of making a difference, and it can be as little or as much as you'd like to do. And perhaps I'll hand over to Panu as well, because it's sort of, we also want to reflect on the 10 weeks, as Deborah, you were saying, that it's been hard, to attend them all, and I've not even managed to attend them all, and neither has Panu. Raul has been here every week. It's quite some commitment, but I think we'll probably continue at least next autumn with more talks, but there will be some other activities coming up as well. But I'll hand over to you as well, Panu.
Yeah. Yes, thanks. Exactly. My feeling is that I got many new ideas. First of all, we started from rather big questions of whole society, putting very big part of them public budget. That's in the Johar, 70% to fighting climate, 30% left for the rest. It's like thinking like Second World War, how societies were completely reorganized to what planning can do. And I'm still, this is in my head, that what really planning can do, because we know, of course, car-free cities, rethinking energy, shortening distances. There are many things quite known, but it's not enough. And there is a certain limit to that. And we also need to tackle our consumption patterns. I think that came also today very clearly in discussions that we can do quite a bit, but after all, people make choices in what they do in their life, how they use their resources, their money, and if we are very good with housing, energy, and transport, we reduce, for example, carbon emissions of those. Then what happens with the rest of people are having in their hands? They still can fly to Thailand, and it's a problem. So I mean, there is this honest complexity and systemic level of what we have been discussing, and I think we did learn a lot already, but there is still quite a bit to learn more. And this set of topics: activate, communicate, educate. Obviously, in our slot is this education. Especially, and we are in the process of rethinking what we are basically communicating to our students. What is the content of our courses? What is the content of lectures? What is the way how we communicate our tasks for students? This is ongoing, and this series has been very helpful in speeding that process, I would say. In our courses, I'm organizing, Sophie organizing, but also more broadly in the School of Architecture in Tampere, and also in other departments. It's now quite well networked already to also environmental policy, to urban sociology, and so forth. There are new initiatives in many ways. So there is quite active process in that sense happening in education. But I think also there, already, I hope next year we can tell a bit more how we start to restructure our educational offer. I mean, what kind of architects, what kind of architecture, what kind of planners, what kind of planning we are teaching. There is, I think, it's high time to make a change, and this series has been very good kind of platform and place to push new ideas and give seeds for rethinking. This has been very successful in that sense. Yeah, as Sophie said, next autumn 22 we will organize something like this, not exactly like this, but something like this, and there will be some other events in between. But clearly, this curriculum development dimension is very important in my opinion. Yeah, has been fantastic set of lectures, 10 slots, 10 big questions. I think about 25 lectures plus a lot of discussion, a lot of chats, and so forth. So has been rich set. Yeah, the ACAN site is open, and I think with Sophie we can promise that we will produce some kind of wrap-up text. Let's see what kind of shape that takes, but like a blog or a reflection type of text. There are many thoughts that that really are still evolving after these sessions.
Yes, I think, yeah, exactly. Some kind of reflection by ACAN, but also then the ACAN members that are part of the education team. But I just want to say, I know we're not many here now. We had about, I don't know, twice as many last week, and it's been quite a mix as well. But also those of you that watched this far on the recording, feel free to get in touch. Those of you here as well, who want to maybe reflect with us together, I put the website there. You can contact us through the ACAN website, or to individual members, Francesca, Raul, myself, or Panu. But I sort of really, this mobilization effort that you referred to, Panu, related to World War II is not amiss, actually, during now also COP discussions. And I think what is also shown in our lecture series, yes, it is about carbon emission reductions, but we cannot do that without all of these other aspects into place as well. Like, you know, consumption patterns can be changed through new models of living and then new models of practicing architecture. And I don't think we talk enough about those issues. And it's Build Environment Day today. Is that right, Judith? Oh, I don't. Okay, she put in the chat that it's Build Environment Day at the COP. But yeah, so I think.
Can I say shortly?
Yeah.
But you know, this is still COVID time, and I have to take my youngest son to COVID test. It starts, but it's okay. But you have to take test, you know, before to go somewhere. So, but I have to now leave. Enjoy being involved in this session and
yes. Okay, thank you so much, Kimon.
Okay.
Let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Let's be in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. But I think that's really it from us, effectively. The recordings, this last one will be put up as well, and they'll be there for a little while longer. So please do catch up on them. I think there's interesting discussions on all of them. We'll do this reflection, as Panu said, and also as ACAN will reflect as well on this model, whether maybe next time is more workshop-based or more breakout session-based and discussion-based and so on. But we'll be back in touch, and please join us as well. So yeah, but that's it from us otherwise. So